But a decent woman cannot do that. So Nigeria start with Akpabio. Nigeria start with the Senate president.
Clearly told him I disagreed with his wife. You saw my statement in Punch. I thought she lied about the incident, and I felt it was right to put things in the right perspective.
I think it's also good that there's a window that if she apologizes for the misconduct, not sexual harassment, that she could be forgiven.
I said you're a fool. I take exception to a senator. Why are you talking to me like that? You are
As a senator, I was suspended illegally because I submitted a petition of sexual harassment against the President of the Nigerian Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio.
In July 2024, the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, publicly apologised. This came after he reprimanded his colleague, Senator Natasha, for speaking out of turn and dismissing her with a remark saying, "We are not in the nightclub."
It's a necessary bill.
The Senator Natasha, in the chamber, you have to be recognized before you speak.
Oh, pardon me.
Yeah, we are not in a nightclub.
Fast forward to February 2005, Senator Natasha refused to accept the reassignment of her seat, and this resulted in her being ordered out of the Senate. A few days later, on Arise TV, Senator Natasha claimed that Akpabio had sexually harassed her.
He was taking me around his house. My husband was walking behind us, held my hand, and we got to this particular room where, when he noticed my husband was a few steps away, he then squeezed my hands in a very suggestive way. We're women, we know what it means when a man squeezes his hands squeezes our hands in a suggestive way. And he went, "I'll make an opportunity for us to come here and have a good moment, you know."
Akpabio has denied all allegations. Senator Natasha subsequently filed a formal petition against Akpabio. It was first of all rejected on procedural grounds. It was then later resubmitted, and this time it was accepted. Following this, Senator Natasha has been handed a 6-month suspension, the official reason being unruly and disruptive behaviour. Senator Bamidele defended the suspension, stating that it wasn't about the sexual harassment allegations, but persistent acts of misconduct. Hello everyone and welcome back. Now, the purpose of this video isn't to assess the merits of the case, nor is it to determine who's telling the truth or who's a dirty little liar, but I do want to use this as an opportunity to explore some of the glaring issues this matter has brought to light. To be honest, they've always been in the light anyway for anyone who cared to see. These are the issues of misogyny, the lack of political representation for women, the lack of regard and care for sexual harassment and sexual assault issues, and also just generalized foolery in one of the highest offices in the land. So let's start with the obvious. Nigeria, the so-called giant of Africa. In the entire Nigerian Senate, there are only 4 women who are senators, despite the fact that women make up almost half the population in Nigeria. That's a very crazy ratio. In fact, let's put that into perspective. In South Africa, 43% of the parliamentary representatives are women. Kenya, 31% of them are women. Out of 275 lawmakers in Ghana, 40 are women. So what does this tell us? Nigeria is very behind. Shock horror. The thing is, by its very nature, the Nigerian Senate is currently a fortress for male power, making it very difficult for women with dissenting voices, granted they have to dissent, to be heard and also advocate for issues affecting them. And again, by its current state, it makes the chamber an oppressive one. On the point of oppression, an academic paper notes that oppression occurs when one group has greater access to power and privileges than another and uses it to maintain a status quo via the dominance over the other group. The lack of women in politics does not set a good example at all. It doesn't show society that this is a space women should and can occupy. There are women out there who believe that politics is actually best left for men, which is absolutely hilarious because for the past 64 or 65 years, Nigeria has been run by men and there's so very little to show for it. The problem with the lack of women in politics is also a systemic issue, because who is going to advocate for women's issues? Who is going to bring it to light? Who's going to push for laws that protect their rights, their safety, their livelihoods? The men certainly won't. And you'll think that in this entire scandal, the 3 remaining women in the Senate would have mobilized and stood by Natasha, but they didn't. For me personally, one of the most striking things about this whole debacle wasn't necessarily the allegations, but the responses. The misogyny that has come out of this has been top notch. Shout out to Nigeria. You will never let me down when it comes to patriarchy. You will never let me down when it comes to misogyny. World best indeed. I didn't even know if they came home last summer with medals from the Olympics. However, if misogyny was a game, I'm pretty sure they would have collected gold. The reactions were absolutely insane and for the most part comical.
I know with what is going on in the Senate, you say, why am I not taking a position? I believe that Senate is doing what is needful, because that's what it is. It's an inside place and it's a matured chambers. We shouldn't be hearing things like that. It's a matured chamber and it should be treated with respect. It's an honor for you to be in that place alone.
So well done to the First Lady. Rather than offering a clear stance against sexual harassment or solidarity with Senator Natasha, in the true misogynistic style, she chose to undermine her. You know, in the clip, she refers to the Senate as a mature chamber. Hence, it's not the kind of space where these kind of matters are played out or brought, you know, to the table. I would infer what she's saying as a way to, of course, diminish it and basically say that it's quite minute. Her comments just evolved into this really stupid and disingenuous moral lecture. It just reinforces the culture of silence and victim blaming. In a baffling turn of events, Akpabio's wife came out stating that she is going to sue Senator Natasha for defamation.
Because I have 4 daughters. Myself, I'm a woman. If somebody harasses me, I will feel bad. Do you understand? But when I know the husband that I'm married to, it's not him that she was talking about. That's not Senator Akpabio. Maybe she was making reference to another person. That's why I said maybe it was an imaginative allegation or a content creation.
Here she tried to vouch for her husband. She mentioned he's good character, which, mind you, is a very crazy thing to do. Unless you're literally conjoined to your partner, I wouldn't recommend vouching for them. How do you know what your husband is up to, madame? How do you know what your husband is up to? You just will not know. My absolute favourite commentary came from ex-Senator Itagiwa.
It is, you feel disappointed that Natasha came out to air a point of. So is it that when a woman is sexually harassed, as she claims, she should keep quiet? Misogyny should continue?
No, I don't.
That women should not speak up? Nobody should talk because she has won an election, she's in the Senate now?
You have passed that. But by the time you contest election and get to Senate, you understand? Yeah. You have passed that. You know, you have passed that stage of your life of being sexually harassed.
Really? So
yes, by the time if you go there and start, you have passed that. If you go there, so you are all equal in that Senate.
So, really? So if somebody
you are all equal, it's out of order. And again, it shows weakness. You don't allow it.
So is it a show of weakness for a woman to speak out?
It cannot happen in the Senate.
Really?
I'm not saying that the lady is lying. You know, I'm not God. But again, my dear, when you get to Senate, you are there as a person. You are not there as a man or woman. You are there as a person. It doesn't matter what you are carrying between whatever.
Complaining that there's no equality.
You are there. And then, mind you,
she's complaining about.
I don't think at this stage of, I respect that girl. I like her. She's very intelligent. Very, very well spoken. You understand?
What makes her comments even more ridiculous is the fact that studies have shown sexual harassment cuts across all levels of employment. It's not restricted to women in lower positions. In fact, it's said that there's a greater risk for women in more authoritative positions. The problem is her segment on Arise News highlights that she has absolutely no understanding of sexual harassment and its nuances. And to be really frank, I'm absolutely tired of Nigerian media platforming people who are very unknowledgeable. It's annoying, it's disgusting, it's just everything bad. Stop feeding bad information to your audiences. These are the type of uncles and aunties that you keep at home and you never take them out to air their opinions publicly. It's more harmful to listen to them than it does no one any good for their opinions to be out in the open. Now, the beauty comment has to be one of the most insidious and annoying responses that have come out of this.
Look at these beautiful women. They've come across me so many times. Have I ever harassed any of you?
The The argument around the notion that she's not the only beautiful woman misrepresents sexual harassment as a function of desirability. And this logic and rhetoric is incredibly flawed and dangerous. It distorts the actual nature of sexual harassment and assault. It makes it a matter of attraction rather than recognizing it for what it really is. And that's a manifestation of power, control, and in its most extreme form, violence. When you think about sexual assault in particular, what it actually is, it's violence. It's not about attractiveness or desire. It's an act of violence perpetuated against the victim. And also, it was just very brazen and cheeky for him to actually say that.
But the beauty of distinguished Senator Natasha is a problem to her.
How can beauty be a problem?
You know, men, when somebody who is pretty passes by you, your attitude will change. You can smile, you can wink, but you may not talk to her. But her beauty is a problem. There's no doubt about that.
And these are prime examples of how these matters aren't taken very seriously at all in Nigeria. Again, the beauty concept pops up again from a very insidious, loudmouth misogynist.
What is wrong with this lady? Does she think that she's the most beautiful woman on earth? Or is it because she's had chocolate color? In my own assessment, she's not among the beautiful women in Nigeria. And it is high time we come hard on her. And why people like us are speaking on top of our voice is not just to protect and defend the Senate president, but to protect and defend her future victims. Even her present husband, she married her out of something like this. She threatened to sue the man and have a letter circulating over the world that the man should pay her 10 billion or marry her. The man had to marry her under duress. So the marriage was under duress and under a product of blackmail.
Note that in that video there was a lot of character assassination. He expressed sheer contempt for Senator Natasha. I mean, look at the way he discussed her marriage. Apparently Senator Natasha blackmailed her husband into marrying her. That's a new one. All in all, if all these comments can be said so publicly, I'm absolutely terrified for the voices that go unheard. In fact, I will share some of the unheard voices later on. In my opinion, there's a significant lack of understanding of gender issues in Nigeria. The majority of society lacks sufficient knowledge on these type of matters, and it's a huge disservice to the country and the people, and it's really stifled progression. There is a lack of education, I don't know if it's intentional at this point, on gender dynamics, power structures, and how these continuously shape Nigerian society. And the lack of discourse and information has continuously eroded our society. There's also a lack of accessible educational materials. It's 2025 and many Nigerians still fail to grasp the concept of feminism. And this is not saying that everyone should have an in-depth understanding of its broad school of thought and everything that it encompasses, but I am saying that it's very important to understand it a little bit and also come to terms with its importance. When feminists aren't being equated to spinsters or witches, they are being told that they are misandrous, which again is a gross misunderstanding of its actual meaning, but ignorance is a choice. So
hereby support and endorse the suspension of Senator Natasha from the Nigerian Senate for 6 months. This will serve as a deterrent to all Nigerians who believe that blackmail is an instrument of war. Let it be known that this negative way of forcing people, mostly the men in authority, by women to get what they want through blackmail has become an old fashion.
So moving on, let's talk about misogyny, internalized misogyny, and the lovely patriarchy. According to Gargam and Lancome, misogyny is defined as the negative attitudes, contempt, and hostility directed towards women, and it can manifest itself verbally, socially, and culturally, and is deeply rooted in a binary understanding of masculinity and femininity. Brogard argues that misogyny isn't necessarily directed towards all women, but rather towards women who defy the rules of patriarchy. That point is incredibly important. You know, people often claim that they're not misogynistic, they have a sister, a wife, a daughter, a mother, a grandma. However, this doesn't exempt them from misogynistic behaviors and attitudes. It may just mean that the women in their lives are agreeable. But the moment they experience women who defy patriarchal norms, tables turn. Women are okay and palatable so long as they know their place. Again, according to Maine, misogyny can be understood as the enforcement arm of patriarchy, responsible for regulating and upholding the system. So internalized misogyny is very relevant when we talk about Nigeria. In my opinion, many Nigerian women suffer from internalized misogyny. And in fairness, that's because they've been socialized within a patriarchal system, a system that emphasizes male superiority and consistently reinforces the notion of female subordination. But I will say, in today's world, in the digital age, there is little excuse to perpetuate anti-feminist ideals and misogyny. And in a society that prides itself on education, there's so much information available. So to choose misogyny or to choose anti-feminist ideals, that's a choice. To be fair, I don't believe Nigeria values education anyway. That's a topic for another day. Internalized misogyny refers to the internalized feelings of self-hatred that perpetuate the belief in their own inferiority to men and the unjust denial of the entitlement to equal rights. This phenomenon is fueled by contempt or animosity towards women who deviate from societal expectations associated with femininity. For sure, you'll find that women who internalize misogyny and patriarchal ideals find their self-worth and self-actualization in men. Dorking argues, in a patriarchal system, women are perceived as the weaker gender and are seen as lacking genuine power. As a result, many women adopt male values to gain significance and purpose. To protect themselves, some women choose to overlook their oppressed status in society or rationalize it, and that is indeed Nigeria to a T. But Millet argues, by adapting behavior to align with male expectations and the patriarchal hierarchy, women may experience psychological relief in the present moment, but ultimately perpetuate their own oppression and maintain the status quo. So they see it as a form of psychological relief, but ultimately, as we know, it has detrimental effects anyway. To be very clear, the Ethics Committee did not suspend Natasha because of the sexual harassment allegations. It was on the grounds of her conduct.
The Senate do suspend Senator Natasha Agbochu-Uduaghan for 6 months for a total violation of the Senate Standing Rules 2023 as amended, for bringing the presiding officer and the entire Nigerian Senate in general to a public opprobrium, with effect from 6th day of March 2025.
But context, as always, is important. By her raising the matter of sexual harassment and subsequently being suspended, it can be argued very reasonably that that was just a pretense and that was used to silence her. They also stated that she can apologise to the Senate as well, and they would reconsider the suspension. By doing this, the Senate is almost presenting her as the aggressor here as opposed to a potential victim. And this is a well played out tactic in misogynistic societies. When women speak out, particularly against very powerful men, the burden is on them to prove their allegations in quite a demeaning manner and or also atone for their accusations. And this is all done whilst being discredited and insulted and disgraced. So before continuing, it's important to ground this conversation in a clear definition of what sexual harassment even is. The UK's Equality Act of 2010 is a good definition to follow. According to the Act, sexual harassment is unwanted conduct of a sexual nature which has the purpose or effect of violating someone's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment for them. The legislation is incredibly broad and encompasses quite a lot of behaviours. It could range from indecent to suggestive remarks, unwanted touching, also abuse, but context is very critical when it comes to the application of the legislation. For example, a simple throwaway comment like, "you have a big bum," can constitute sexual harassment under the Act. It's really contingent on the setting, the intent, also how the person receiving the comment received it. But in Nigeria, sexual harassment is trivialized. It's often ignored. There's a cultural and societal reluctance to even engage with it properly. Survivors of sexual harassment and assault are often silenced, disbelieved, and shamed. The reporting process in Nigeria is unhelpful and pathetic, and it's incredibly dehumanizing for victims. Police officers and the relevant authorities lack the training and empathy to deal with these matters properly, and they frequently, more often than not, fail to support victims. An Amnesty International report, which is titled The Access to Justice for Women and Girl Survivors of Rape in Nigeria, highlights that most survivors don't even bother to report these crimes, and this is due to the fear that they won't even be believed and they will also be shamed. One lady's account read, "I did not report to the police. When you go there to report your case, you end up being labelled a liar or an attention seeker, or that you enjoyed it. I do not trust Nigeria's justice system at all." In another testimony, a woman who had been raped by her neighbour, when she did go to the police, the response there was almost equally as harrowing, in my opinion. She told Amnesty International that the police officer said to her, "Why would you allow a man to rape you? If it was my daughter, she wouldn't have done this. It seems like you were enjoying it. Very soon, you'll get pregnant for the rapist." You know, it really saddens me to say that these reports aren't anomalies, they are commonplace. These matters are handled terribly. Might I add, there's also a very widespread practice of settling these matters out of court. According to Amnesty, survivors are pressured to reach informal settlements. In many cases, they're pressured to receive an apology or maybe a settlement of money. And of course, that would be in exchange for dropping the case. In other words, justice isn't denied, it's commodified. I've touched on wealth worship in Nigeria quite lightly, and I'm yet to do a deep dive on it. But the sheer love of money and the fact that you can use money to do anything, even abort justice, it has made the country rotten to the core. UNICEF has reported that only 0.9% of perpetrators of sexual assault are brought to trial and almost none are convicted. So while rape is a criminal offence, the implementation of the law and its actual effect is redundant. The actual system that's supposed to protect citizens is traumatizing. And as long as this type of impunity exists, the message is very, very clear. Sexual violence is permissible, justice is optional. And again, just touching on the law, there is an absence of legislation outlawing workplace sexual harassment. And the sheer fact that there's a gap in the law here shows that Nigeria doesn't even consider it necessary to legislate against it. And it almost institutionalizes the injustice regarding workplace sexual harassment. It's very clear, it's just not seen as important and it's undermined. The lack of explicit legislation prohibiting sexual harassment in the workplace stands in very clear contrast to other countries. According to figures in 2021, 134 countries have outlawed sexual harassment in the workplace. Within Africa, 33 countries explicitly prohibit sexual harassment in the workplace. Nigeria, of course, is none of them. And this vacuum leaves women vulnerable and, of course, men. We can confirm this because statistics show us this. A report by Stand to End Rape showed that 64% of women in Nigeria have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. And it's really difficult for women to speak up. Studies show that some women tolerate it out of fear of losing their jobs. One woman in a case study stated, "I took care of my boss sexually, pleased him sexually to avoid being fired. This is what it takes to keep a job in Nigeria of today. These are the way things are." Many women in Nigeria experience this, not even in the workplace, in social settings, family settings, religious settings. And there is often very, very, very little recourse to justice. Of course, Senator Natasha's allegations align with this pattern, where powerful men and men in authority use their position to demand sexual favours. Many women have to navigate unwanted advances from men in the workplace and just even in society as a cost of entry into male-dominated spaces. Funnily enough, come to think of it, this is played out a lot in Nollywood. I would recommend watching my video on Nollywood and misogyny and the portrayal of women. But I just remembered now that we do see this a lot in Nollywood. And that's the trope of the very domineering boss and the subordinate female employee. And he's constantly objectifying her, making advances towards her. But instead of Nollywood showing it as a critique of the abuse of power, those narratives are often romanticized. That trope in and of itself is very harmful, and it's normalized these very crazy dynamics. By making that trope a very romantic and flowery subplot of romantic expression, it removes it from the reality of what it is, and that's coercion and exploitation. It rewrites sexual harassment as something benign. Final thoughts. Again, this is not commentary on the merits of the case, but an attempt to bring light to some of these issues. We don't have enough people, we don't have enough voices talking about it and raising awareness. The truth is, the culture of sexual harassment and sexual violence is normalized. As a matter of fact, Nigeria has one of the highest rates, if not the highest, rate of child marriage in the world. FGM, female genital mutilation, is also very, very high. Unfortunately, my reach is only so little, and it does sadden me that, you know, people are going through hell. I appreciate that it also may be a delicate topic for some. As always, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. But anyways, I shall see you next time, probably in May. You know, one of the worst parts about video essays for me is recording, and also having a light in my face constantly is very, very dazing, and it's not nice.